In some ways, it's a kind of very old-fashioned question, I suppose, in a lot of ways. Old-fashioned being from the 1990s, um, in that what it reminded me of, some aspects of this reminded me of Susan McClary's analysis about chromaticism in um, early opera, and the way that it was used to portray madness as a being out of the the rational was to follow the norms of the musical style, and that when you ornamented and um, when you were chromatic, then you were the kind of crazy person, basically. And so, um, uh, what was interesting is that a lot of the things that are transgressive in this, to my ear, were quite that well, there were some things that came out of that idea in some ways. So there are a few of the ways that she used her head voice sometimes sounded quite kind of genre inappropriate, if you like. That it sounded like she was kind of jumping into or jumping out of metal and into almost R&B in some instances, and certainly out of that. And I wonder if that's a kind of another type of transgression, um, uh, and whether that is a kind of way of expressing difference from, or I don't know. I'm not sure what it means, to be honest. I haven't really had time to think it through, but it struck me um, as a thing, and I just wondered if you.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. She talks when she talks about her vocal technique. She is very clear that she has at her disposal many tools in her toolkit. She's really developed a full range of vocal expressivity, and she says, and you can see this happening. She says that a singer has to have all of this at their disposal for immediate use to respond to the immediate situation. You can't be planning it too much. You have to just be able, you have to know it so well you can just do it. You have to be a virtuoso and just be able to do this. And so she pops in to chest voice, into head voice. It really seems effortless, and from the expert singer's point of view, there's a lot of admiration for what she can do in that regard. So it transgressive, maybe not always, maybe sometimes nodding to a kind of seriousness, but she certainly has the gamut of emotional expression and genre references and musical context, and she can just pull those in a very immediate way. So this is what's remarkable about hearing her sing, is that immediacy and that nuance. And it's not to say she's not thinking about it, she's deeply thinking about it, but it happens also at a really fast pace because she's got so much experience behind her now to know how to do this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the performances as she got older. I mean, you can hear the way that they changed and the way that they became richer. Um, yeah, Zachary, do you want to? That's rather than me reading out questions from the chat. Do you want to unmute yourself and
Sure.
uh,
Yeah, I can read a question. Um, Thanks for the presentation, Laurie. It was really great. I was just wondering if you looked at extra musical data that informed your analyses, particularly things like interviews, public appearances, social media, and if it informed your analyses in the way that these artists are negotiating gender within music, metal culture, musically, or even just generally.
Yeah, I read a lot of the interviews and the little films that are made about these women in metal, and oftentimes they are gathered together into a group of female metal singers. And so then in the process of answering questions, they do always get around to issues about gender because it's put on display. You know, the whole question of their gender in that genre is put on display. So I do follow a lot of the interviews, but I wouldn't say that what I do is in the vein of reception theory. So I don't really, you know, I haven't been making a kind of systematic approach to that, but I'm definitely influenced. I read what, and I watch on clips what Flor has to say about what she wants to be doing. And it's quite fascinating. I take it all with a grain of salt too, because sometimes they say in an interview, an artist might say something that is protective of a position that they don't want to reveal. So for instance, in a lot of the Nightwish interviews, where Flor is sitting with Thomas Holopainen and they're talking about the brilliance of a Nightwish album, she's going to be very respectful about that work, and she might be thinking, I wish I could contribute compositionally to this work, but she doesn't say so, you know. So there's a lot of like what they do say and what they don't say that I'm thinking about as well when I watch these interviews. But again, I haven't been systematic about that. Did you have thoughts about that, Zach?
Not in particular. I was also just thinking also about how genre categories within metal seem to be really complicated and changing all the time. And I was also just wondering how this is different for artists, for bands which have female leads or female singers in them, because it seems like it would be different in that.
Yeah, it is different. Yeah, because they all get lumped into something that is referred to as a genre called female fronted metal, but it's not a genre. That's not a genre. And so the women in this who get categorized that way speak out against this quite a bit. And they say, you know, I'm working in melodic death metal, or I'm working in black metal, or I'm working in symphonic metal. That's the genre in which I work. And the notion of female fronted metal being a genre is ridiculous, as it would be ridiculous if we said it was male fronted metal. You know, it doesn't make sense. So it's an interesting term. I can't really completely eliminate that term from the lexicon because it's being used. And so, you know, I prefer to kind of think about it as a, I guess I want to problematize it. It would be the, what is that, a 90s expression?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Stan, did you want to come in? Your mic's not working.
Hi, Laurie.
There's Stan. Hi, Stan.
Hello. Thanks so much for a really thrilling presentation. And if we have to compare the analysis you've just undertaken to what was going on in the 1990s by distinguished scholars such as Susan McClary, this has come really a few decades further. The way in which you've dealt with genres that weren't even around during that period, the methodologies, the intertextual way of looking at this, and then at the same time the hermeneutics that were invested in this, and also placing this in a particular space and time just really brought that analysis alive. And I've just got a few comments and then just one question, if I may. The first one is, this is a comment. What struck me in your presentation was how arguments within musicology can also be staged in terms of the ways in which we interpret, and the whole matter of theatricality, something which I'm going to dwell on in a few weeks' time, really came out as cushioned by the intricacies of the musical parameters you identified, the harmony, the melodic, the textural, and also the recording, and the way in which the whole thing is put together in terms of the production. And I think what struck me most of all, that was most original in your presentation, was actually this idea of risk-taking within the virtuosic realm of performance. And I know very few musicological analyses that actually deal with, these really important issues of screams, death growls, the belting lines, and all those tortuous aspects of Flora's way of performing that I feel really had to be addressed. And I think this is, for me, one of the first studies in heavy metal that actually deals so explicitly with subjectivity and sexuality in the context of a female performer, which then brings me on to my question, which I wanted to ask you. And it relates to the ways in which female artists in heavy metal are often described as female-fronted metal artists. And I'm interested to just hear from you what you feel about the music industry's impact on fans and how tastes and preferences are so often deemed as gender determined. And I was just thinking the inequality of situating artists in the works and genres of dominant groups, and heavy metal has been a male-dominated group, is kind of an ever-pervasive problem. And by addressing the relational, visual, and gestural parameters, I think your analysis opens for a truly polysemic interpretation of heavy metal. And not only from a feminist position, but from a position that is, as I say, polysemic and part of what we should all stand for.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes me think of a lot of things, but I maybe would cite Berkers and Schopp, who talk about gender and heavy metal. There's a lovely book, fairly recent, 2018, and they refer to femininity in metal as a double-edged sword. And I liked that discussion in their study, because and the female artists talk about this, that they want to, they are women and they want to be feminine and they want to explore their sexuality, but they also get sometimes slammed for it. So Alyssa White-Gluz, who is one of the growling vocalists I've been looking at, she says, no matter what she does, no matter what she wears, there's always going to come a moment where somebody says, so you should take your clothes off. Now is when you take your clothes off. And she said she just, as a woman in metal, even if these women have huge respect, they're highly respected for what they do, there nevertheless still come these moments where the comment is, yeah, but you should take your clothes off. Or, I was at a Killswitch Engage concert at Heavy Montreal in Montreal a couple of years ago, and it was upsetting when one of the band members started to shout to the woman who was on the shoulders of an audience member. The band member shouted, "Take your top off," right? Like it's part of metal culture. This whole treatment of women in that particularly objectified way. And when you're on stage, you are in that double-edged sword position. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. And they all address this in interviews and in various film clips. Flor Jansen and Alyssa White-Gluz and Angela Gosso and Doro Pesch, all of these, really big names in female metal, they all address this challenge of, what is it to be a woman in a field that is largely a male-dominated domain. So your question.
Sorry, I've just lost that last point.
Yeah, Larry.
Yeah, I think my bandwidth. That's my concern, but.
Okay, we lost about your last sentence, so it was the.
Yeah. That's okay.
Could you just?
We can move on.
Could you just? Oh, okay. If okay. All right.
I might not remember what my last sentence was.
Okay. That's my life as well at the moment.
Thanks for your responses anyway.
Sarah Sharp, do you want to come in?
Hi there. I'm just wondering whether you think that the gender expectations of female metal singers might have an effect on their mental health. You were saying about the audience members, being asked to take their top offs, and just how females react mentally to the pressures and being a front singer as well.
Yeah, I haven't done any ethnographic work, to explore questions like that, but I can imagine that it is a major issue for them. There was a really lovely film, what's it called? Something highs and brutal lows. I forget what the first word is. But in it, Doro Pesch talks about a moment in her career when on stage she had a little wardrobe malfunction. And in the wardrobe malfunction, she didn't realize that she was being exposed. And so they caught that in a photograph, and then she went to a record store to do a signing on a tour, and out comes a poster, and they asked her to sign the poster of her having her wardrobe malfunction. And in talking about that, I could, in witnessing her being interviewed about this, I could really witness the frustration. She said, I wanted to be taken seriously as a metal singer. I didn't want this to be the thing that got in the way. So how they cope with it, I guess the ones who really are in it for the long haul, they figure out ways to cope with it. But they do experience burnouts. Floor Jansen had a major burnout. Was it caused by the stress of being a woman in the field? It's always a complicated and multifaceted situation, but I imagine it was part of the pressure, because they talk about extra pressures, right? The men don't have to wear the same level of makeup, and they also talk, Angela Gosso and people like Annika van Giersbergen, they talk about and this would be true of any metal singer, the body is something to really look after well when you have to go every night on stage and sing and be able to sing. So the full balance of life and health and physical well-being come into play. And how do you manage that when you are on tour? I think women probably have many other issues to deal with than just it's a factor of biology, but as I say, I haven't done that kind of ethnographic work, and there is good work like that to refer to.
Karishma, do you want
to? First of all, thank you so much for a truly rich and very, very thought-provoking paper. So from Ireland, I have a question to do with the pedagogy of this kind of musical analysis. How does it actually work? Do students have a familiarity with the kind of music and the kind of questions that you raise through your analysis? Or is it a case of perhaps developing a methodology that actually fits this particular genre, this particular style?
Yeah, well, there you're asking about something that is very near and dear to my heart, and the people who are in the room there who have taken courses with me are probably smiling a little bit right now, because that's kind of my happy place, is to be thinking about pedagogical methods and this kind of thinking. What are all the factors that you can, how can you assemble them in a way that then can lead to what I like to say is a fairly systematic analysis and systematic interpretation, so that it's not simply a rush to interpret. And my internet was unstable there for a second. Did I cut out again?
No, I think I got most of the things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'd be happy to send you papers that are a little more methodological than this one. This one, I wasn't hitting you over the head with my analytic method, but I certainly have papers where I do a little bit of that teacherly approach.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Happy to send those to you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Absolutely.
Yeah, does anyone else want to jump in with a question? Okay, well, actually, I've got one more. Well, it's I suppose it's I mean, in some ways it's more of a comment, but it goes to what Zach's just put into the chat feed there about the double standards and the because when I did my paper last week, I was looking at a bunch of artists from the perspective of what it would be like to have them as PhD students, and one person that I looked at was Courtney Cox, who's a guitarist with the Iron Maidens, a tribute act, an all-female Iron Maiden tribute act, and the interesting layer on top of that is the fact that she's got this huge YouTube following of around sort of 7 million followers or something, or at least her videos get 7 million hits for her guitar kind of workshopy type things, and you know, my favorite 7 riffs, and you know, those kinds of things. And yet the videos of her performing, the mix of comments just go completely from the way that she's using the Mixolydian scale here is just amazing, to really kind of disgusting comments about her physique, and just that sort of blend. And quite often the same people will sort of say entirely conflicted things. The same men will say entirely conflicted things about her, and it's I mean, that is a really we're getting a lot of people interested in your methodological papers here in the chat, but that I don't know how to turn this into a question really, but I suppose this in some way feeds back to Sarah's question about the kind of the mental health issues, I suppose, in that it that kind of schizophrenia about who you are just doesn't exist for all the male artists, and
right. And then, so in a way, it's why I was so fascinated with Floor, and why I have been fascinated with Alyssa White-Gluz, the metal singers that are taking these extreme positions are really interesting. And it's a generational thing too, because so there's a whole gathering of female artists who were born in the 70s, like Christina Scabia and Tarja Turunen, and there's a whole bunch that were born in the 70s. And then Floor was born in 81, and there's a whole grouping of artists born in the 80s. And now there are bands where that have female singers born in the 90s. And it's interesting to watch the trajectory, because as time is going on, and these models exist that they can look to what a female artist is doing as they age and as they mature in the field of metal and all the different subgenres of metal. So the possibilities now seem endless, you know, for these young women. And the stuff that's coming out now by really young bands is remarkable. It's the women are adopting, because they've had the model of someone like Floor or someone like Angela Gosso. They've sexism and you know, sort of gender struggles in society. It's changing. And there are moments where we see things we don't want to see, and there are moments where we feel proud of progress. So, you know, I guess I have to say I like to choose the artists that that operate in a more progressive realm, And as a result, I end up working with materials that make me feel very hopeful, rather than taking examples that seem to just repeat some of the deep problems from the popular music industry in the past. That's a big statement. You know, a lot of things, when we say these things quickly, you know, I'll probably say later, oh dear, you know, I should have said this or that, but
Yeah, no, well, that's that's everybody.
whenever I teach courses on gender and sexuality in music, I say, you know, it's all, in a way, it's all like a fight. It's all like a negotiation, right? Nothing is absolute, and we have to think very carefully about how we talk about these examples. Yeah.
Okay.
I see a question from Alyssa.
Yeah, Alyssa, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. Hi, Alyssa. What sonic visualization application? Oh, so that is Isotope RX.
Okay.
Hi, Alyssa.
Hi, sorry, I couldn't unmute for a second.
So Isotope is a company that produces a lot of really sophisticated tools. The people in the room there who are highly tech oriented would be able to say more, but I do find that one to be a very friendly program, and it provides a lot of amazing content. And one of the things you can do in Isotope that I didn't do here, but I could have, you can rebalance the recording so that you pull out only the voice, and you can reduce the balance in the mix of the other instruments. So as a result, you can really pull out your vocal content. If it's growling, the machine won't think that it's vocal content. It'll think it's part of the instrumental texture. So it's a little bit difficult with growling vocals. But yeah, Isotope.
Very cool. It really,
yeah,
really helped to augment your analytic points. Thanks.
Yeah, I keep thinking that we should get start some kind of platform that talks about the way that these visualization techniques, because it's not just spectro morphology and spectrographs and so forth, but also just structural analysis of videos and being able to annotate video structure. There's a lot of stuff out there, and none of it seems perfect, but it's really interesting to see how people use it creatively in different ways. And I think it's great to see the way that you are using spectrographs in there, and you do it entirely differently to the way that I do it, and I'm also sort of thinking, well, maybe I should take that little idea. I'm just wondering whether we should sort of, you know, set up a little workshop or something, because it's I think it's a you know, it's a big subject area, and it's not one where we have a clear yes to that, Simon, and that would be great. So okay,
yeah, absolutely. People are mentioning
myself into some more work.
Yeah, people are mentioning Sonic Visualizer for sure. I use that all the time. I do find that some of these programs that you pay for, like Steinberg products or the Isotope products, you do get a really sophisticated set of tools. And I use Sonic Visualizer all the time as well, because it's free and students can download that. But some of the other applications are worth the coin.
Yeah, it's a little slicker, and somebody's taken a little more trouble to keep it up to date, and all those, you know, just tiny details and things that do make it work a little better. Okay, so that's not a question from Abigail. That's a kind of thanks and goodbye from Abigail. Great. If there aren't any more questions, maybe that is a good time to call an end to what we're doing. That was really great, Laurie. I really enjoyed that. And yeah, I'm very keen to get a look at this analytical paper that you were talking about, the methodological paper that you were talking about.
Okay. Can you
as
tell
well.
me, where will the chat, can you tell us how to operate with the chat, and then I could add materials to that?
I'm not sure how. It's the good question. I think I can incorporate the chat into the recording. I'm going to ask Dan Pratt to answer that, because he's the kind of person that knows this stuff. Dan?
Hello.
Hey, do you know how?
What
Do you know how we
specifically
can
did you want to do?
incorporate the chat into the recording?
So we can't put it in the recording, but we can save the chat, and we can put it up as a file. So just next to the file is the 3 dots.
Yeah.
So you can save the whole chat, and yeah, that's a good idea. Pop it into the YouTube comments, possibly.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. Chat saved. Okay. Done.
Okay. Good.
Great. Okay.
Okay.
And put it into the YouTube comments rather. Yep. Okay. We can do that. I can put it into the YouTube comments, and I can put it on the website as well, so that we've got
Great.
both.
It would be interesting to do a big dig into those sonic visualizing tools as well. I agree, Simon, because you can even do things like look into the harmonic content of vocals and the enharmonic content, then edit them and change the nature of a vocal on an absolutely micro level, which is a sort of fascinating look at what is real and what is not.
Yeah. No, indeed. Yeah, I'm also. I mean, but actually, in a lot of ways, I'm more interested in ways of of creating a kind of timeline visualization of the kind of analysis that you've been doing, because at the moment a lot of these things we have to rely on just kind of long chunks of text in things that feel intuitive. Once you grasp them, they feel like something that is much more, oh yeah, I could see that, and
Right. Yeah. If I could speak to that just for one final thing on my part. Yeah, I've been calling this analytic immersion. So when I build a screen, what I want you to see is a kind of multimodal set of content. So you can see what the lyrics are, you can see what the sound is through the visualization. I've also got a way of having the video clip run at the same time that you can see the sonic visualization using Cubase, which is another way to make it more multimodal. And then I do these little analytic comments in what I'm calling postcards. So at the bottom of the screen, when you were seeing the little summary statements of the analytic content, my hope is that as you watch the screen, you're hearing the music, you're seeing the music unfold, because you can, even knowing a little bit about spectrogram, you can see the music unfold. You can think about the words, you can think about those analytic comments, and kind of experience this in a way that I'm thinking of as being immersive, a kind of multimodal immersion. And so that for me, that's a really important part of it. It's why in some ways I'd rather do this than publish a paper that has a kind of flat, two-dimensional and very prosaic sort of experience for the reader, for the viewer. So I'm all for us moving in the direction of dynamic curation of, immersion of these analytic experiences.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think the idea of a kind of interactive, that you can take yourself into further depth at different things, that you can look at it, you could create an analysis that is almost like a kind of game that somebody can go through and choose which things they dive into and which things or when they look at the whole narrative arc, and when they jump in and look at what you've said or what you are demonstrating about some tiny feature, that it's an interactive process that you kind of choose which level you want to look at it at. I think that's a really interesting thing. And and the other, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these things, you can see that the technology is kind of there in things, just, you know, sort of things that feel kind of prosaic in lots of ways, like the way that SoundCloud allows you to, you know, click and put a comment at a particular moment in a song, and be able to then visualize that when somebody else, you know, somebody else can visualize that when they're listening back. You know, that seems like a really good analytical tool as well, and it's just you know, bringing that into line with a load of other analytical tools. It feels like there's a project there that
Yeah.
anyway, I'm going to step away from putting myself up for volunteering with things, but I think it's great, and I mean, this was a real, as Zachary's saying there, this is a masterclass in both analysis and dissemination, and I think it's great what you're doing, and your love for it is coming through as well, very clearly. All right, so thanks everybody for coming, and just a reminder for those of you who are still here, well, there's quite a lot of you still here, that Thursday we have Alan Moore and Paul Carr, and a cast of thousands, it sounds like, including you, Laurie. I think you're in on the Thursday discussion as well, talking about the Bloomsbury Handbook on Rock Music Research. And then on Friday, Alex is running the Postgraduate and Early Career Researcher Forum again. So just like to say thanks one final time, and oh, sorry, and Agata's reminded me we've got the concert on Thursday night, because we've delayed it from tonight in support of the what's the hashtag, Agata?
Blackout Tuesday.
Blackout Tuesday, that's the hashtag. So we have 3 artists playing on Thursday after the rock music research presentation, and their work will be on the website afterwards. So thanks, Laurie. That's been...
Thanks for hosting, Simon. I hope my internet held up enough through the presentation part. I don't have a lot of bandwidth here, but